Okie dokie. Hello and welcome to MyOsh Webinars. My name is Christina and I will be your host for today. Today is our final webinar for the year, and boy, are we going out with a bang. Our webinar today is being presented to you by the fabulous Annette Gray from Annette Gray Consulting, and she will be sharing what she learned in Antarctica about leadership, wellbeing and climate change. Now, before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. The chat function has been turned off. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A panel and we will open for questions periodically. Please do not be shy. We encourage lots of questions and interaction today. So pop those questions in and we will respond to you throughout the webinar. I will just let you know that the webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you all once published, along with these slides as well. So if you have any questions afterwards, we can action those afterwards. So now, without any further ado, I will hand over to Annette.
Thank you so much, Christina. So let me get my slides working. So pleased to be here, and really, I'd really love this to be a conversation around what I experienced by going to Antarctica. And I must say it was incredibly life-changing. And to this point, I only got back just over a week ago and found it really hard to get back into the groove of living in summer again, because I've been in winter for about a month. So let me share with you some of the lessons I learned about leadership, and in particular helping women find their voice. This was an extraordinary experience because I'm a leadership coach and I've been involved with supporting women in this particular program through Homeward Bound since 2018, I think it's been about 6 programs. And I do it as a pro bono service to help work with women leaders who are in STEM around their leadership. So this time I got the opportunity to actually go to Antarctica, whereas normally I'm living through the participants. I got the opportunity to go because there were some spare spots. So I was actually what's called an invited guest, but I also, so I got to experience the program as a participant, but also having the lens as a coach. So I did have a few coaching sessions while I was on board as well. So what we know is the old way of leadership is not working anymore, particularly around these complex issues that have emerged for us, having come back from COVID and hybrid working, but also the big agenda that's happening at the moment, which is climate change. And the old way of doing things and the old way of leading is not quite working. So having the lens of what is leadership for the future is part of what I'm going to be talking about today. And in particular, helping women step up and people of diversity have more of an impact around leadership and these world issues that we have. So a little bit about what the program was about. I went away with 88 amazing women from 19 countries, and they're from STEM, so science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine. And all these women were leading in their fields, or are leading in their fields. But many of their common stories was about not being heard and not being able to influence change. A lot of them were scientists, a lot of them working in academia, but there are also a lot that working in governments with United Nations. There was an ex-vice president of Colombia, there was an astronaut. So incredible women were here, yet the common theme was we're being suppressed. We're not having the opportunity to influence things. And if you know about COP28, COP28 is where climate change is being discussed at the moment. Sadly, only 14 women represented out of 140 leaders around the world there. And so this is what these women are talking about. These big topic areas, they're not having an opportunity to actually have a voice around it. So this leadership initiative goes over a year. So what is Homeward Bound and why Antarctica? Homeward Bound is a women in leadership initiative that helps women around the world in STEM develop leadership ability. Because one of the other common themes here was that women aren't getting developed around their leadership. So that is why these women were handpicked. There's a selection process, and they had to apply. But the program actually happens before getting to Antarctica. So it goes over a year. And I'm a coach on the program. So I coach women. I had 2 women this particular program, but I'm actually got 2 women I'm coaching currently in the Homeward Bound 8 program. So because they couldn't go in COVID times, they were able to come now. So no ships went to Antarctica during COVID. So this 2023 was the first voyage since 2019. So it had a backlog of people going to it. So the whole emphasis on board then was around consolidating what they'd learned around their leadership, around visibility, around well-being, leading in complexity and complex times, particularly through this lens of climate change. So this program was around helping them have a voice around climate change after Antarctica. So the strong building of networks was a key aspect of it, and building collaborations. And I'm in one of the collaborations, which I'm thinking of writing a book around some of these people's, women's experience around leadership and what emerges from Antarctica. So what we know about future leadership and leaders for the future is the old style, command control style of leadership is not cutting it anymore. So now we live in an era where our workforces and our families as well are wanting different interactions and a different way of being and a more respectful way of having conversations. So what is really key is knowing thyself. So being self-aware and knowing what impact you have on others. So if you think of that being the overarching theme of this whole leadership initiative, is we can't lead well if we don't know ourselves and we don't know what impact we're having others. So given that, these women actually went through what's called the lifestyles inventory. And I'm just showing you this tool here. So one aspect was understanding what is the thinking going on behind their behavior. And that's what we call the LSI 1, the Lifestyles Inventory 1. So creating self-awareness. What's my self-talk like? What is the stories I'm telling myself that then impacts how I behave with others? And this was the lens on the ship then for the interactions. We wanted to create an environment of being blue around how do we interact in a really respectful way. And if you think about world leaders like Jacinda Ardern, he would operate, and the Canadian Prime Minister, they're very constructive in how they interact. And what we know through the research behind Lifestyles Inventory is that long-term high performance, long-term engagement happens if leaders interact in a constructive way. However, people don't know how to do that. So part of this program was about helping educate these women. What is constructive relationships? What is a constructive way of leading? how do you do that? So on the ship, it was consolidating that learning, even though they had coaching one-to-one on that prior to the ship. If you think about Donald Trump, he would clearly fit in this red zone. Yeah, very much about having power over people, controlling people, being oppositional and criticizing what people have to say. That's a very red way of leading, and it generally is more task oriented. And the green way of leading is being very passive, very conscious of how you're relating to others, but not feeling safe, so you control it. So you actually give away your power. So whereas blue styles are sharing power, green styles are giving away power, and red is power over. The old style of leading tends to be more red orientated. So this learning opportunity on the ship was around, how do I understand how my old patterns showing up? Yeah. And to give you context, on the ship, there was no time to get away from people. Even in our rooms, we shared rooms with someone else. So there was no alone time. So what happens when we don't get what we normally need? We go into old patterns or tell ourselves stories about things that happen, beliefs that we've had from the past. So I know for me, an old pattern for me is competitiveness and approval seeking. And wow, that came out big time on the ship, even though I've done a lot of work on myself. So there was a lot of learning for me as well on the ship. The other lens was this framework, and this is a leadership wellbeing tool. It's only a self-assessment. So these women did a self-assessment on how are they going in terms of working well and living well. And this framework is helping people understand, in particular leaders, what thriving workplaces look like. Yeah. And what leaders can do to model that. So this was the other lens that they did a lot of learning about, in terms of how do I work well, but also how do I live well? And these are the elements that were put into place. And many of you, being safety professionals, well-being is on your agenda. But even well-being isn't modeled by leaders, and that impacts the well-being of their teams. So it's really important that leaders have an understanding of their own well-being so that they can learn it, live it, and then embed it in their workplace. And I'm not going to go right through that, but you'll sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You will recognize some of the things that, are important to well-being here. But I love this tool because it actually helps educate leaders. GLWS stands for Global Leadership Wellbeing Survey. So it helps educate leaders on what is thriving for themselves to look like, and then how can they do that in their teams. So this is where we went. We went to the Antarctica Peninsula. And that's where most cruisers go to Antarctica when their tourists go. And this is where we went. But we had to be very flexible, because even though we were briefed on where we would go the night before, it was all dependent on the weather. So sometimes we'd be disappointed that we weren't going to do a landing that day. Sometimes we could just do a cruise and see whales or see icebergs or those sorts of things. But this was basically, if you're interested in that's where we went. And we were there in Antarctica for 15 days. When you take out the 2 days getting there, and we left from Ushuaia in Argentina, from the 2 days it takes to get there and the 2 days back, we had 15 days, and most cruises only have 5. So we were extremely lucky. And what happened on board is, as you can see first, look at the size of the ship. It was tiny compared to another big ship that was right there beside us, who was leaving at the same time, and that was a normal cruise size ship. This was a research ship. So we had very basic living on board. It wasn't all the plush frills and things that you get on normal cruises. And that added to the appeal as well, that we were like scientists being down there. And so, as you can see, from these two pictures here, we had workshops on board. So half the day was workshopping topics of leadership, and then the second half was going on land, going on the Zodiac blow-up dinghies to cruise around. And sometimes that was flipped. Sometimes, depending on the weather, we'd do that in the morning and do the workshopping in the afternoon. And as you can see, when we would be in the workshop area, we'd see these amazing scenery behind us. You can see it in that window there of this just stunning scenery, or huge icebergs floating by. And sometimes someone would yell waves and everyone stopped and ran out to have a look at the waves. So it was very flexible in terms of how the workshopping part worked. And as you can see, we exercised as well. We did yoga, we did HIIT classes in the morning that were run by different people on the ship. And then the icebergs, absolutely amazing. And as I was saying to Christina before we got on, there was one in the shape of a cupcake, if you see her in this picture here, which was extraordinary. And then the blue was out of this world. And what we were really lucky about is we had incredible sunny blue sky days. But one of the lessons that we picked up is that, or insights, if Antarctica melts, which is a big area of ice, if that melts through the impact of climate change, our sea levels are going to rise by 60 meters, which that's devastating to the world. A lot of countries will disappear. So to see this in real life, it was life-changing in the aspect of you want to do everything to keep this pristine. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware of the Antarctica Treaty, but Antarctica is the only place in the world that no country owns. So it's the only true collaborative place. So this Antarctic Treaty was set up so that all countries would collaborate and look after it. And the two purposes of Antarctica is for peace and science. And so that's what's tricky now, that more tourists are going to it. And in the last year, 100,000 tourists have been there. So this is why all countries have to work together to protect this area, because if tourism raises and there's no guidelines around these tour operators, it could be devastating to Antarctica. And you can see here in this picture the size of the icebergs. Some of them were the size of buildings just floating by. And you felt like you were transported into Narnia. It just did not feel quite real. And then we have this iceberg. And we're on Zodiac. So the Zodiacs are these inflatable boats. And we were just cruising around this iceberg. And let me show you what happened through this video. Just bear with me. I'll just make sure you can hear the sound. That's me.
Oh my gosh, look at this.
Getting shocked, but look, watch, it flips.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. still going.
Those are penguin tracks on.
When you see that black ice there, that actually tells us that it's thousands of years old
That's
when you see
incredible.
black ice like that.
And the after picture.
Yeah. And video, yeah. Wow.
So pretty amazing, I might end it there.
Yeah. Look at it.
Oops. And now for the penguins. They were incredible. So these guys were so tame, it was quite amazing. And because we're actually the first ship that for the season that actually arrived in Antarctica, so we saw no other cruise ships there. So everything was incredibly pristine, and because it was still spring, there was still snow on some of these landings, whereas when you get further into summer, some of the snow is not there anymore. So we saw these amazing penguins in action, and the cutest things ever. And here's a little one. They're nesting. They take their stones to their partner, and then go off and get another stone and bring it back. And they were just incredible to watch how they live. And this view is amazing. This area, we've got this incredibly warm day. I think it was only 2 degrees that day that we were on that particular landing. So I haven't seen any questions come through. So Mel, there is one question. So Mel, do you want me to stop here for the question?
Yeah, so the only question so far is, where can we find the GLWS framework tool? Is that something that you have specifically, or is that something we can share with everybody?
Yes, I can share some information about that, but basically it's accredited consultants that help people go through it.
Okay, amazing.
Because it's so I can put it in the show notes afterwards.
I was going to say we might add those into all the information we send out afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. And please, everybody else, if you do have any questions throughout, it has been incredible so far. I saw the cupcake iceberg.
That's what I mentioned.
Exactly what it is. So if you have any questions, please continue to pop them in.
So I want to show you this interview I did with one of the participants. And as I said, these women were amazing. Just hold on a sec. I'm just going to put my microphone back in because I took it out when we were doing that video. Bear with me. Okay, I'm back on. And Bree Wade is a cybersecurity person, heading up a team at Commonwealth Bank. Really incredibly intelligent, capable woman, and she's only 27. So here I'm interviewing her about her experience of being on the voyage.
Hello, Bree. This is Bree Wade. So, Bree, tell me, what's your role?
I work as the Senior Manager of the Cyber Defence Analytics team at Commonwealth Bank.
And so, coming to Antarctica and doing Homeward Bound, what were your best hopes in terms of the Antarctic part of it? What were you hoping to come from it?
Yeah, I think being completely off the grid and immersed in such an incredible and awe-inspiring environment was the big appeal for me. We have so many just incredible stories here on the ship with us, and I wanted to learn and listen and soak in as much knowledge as I could in quite an environment that is like no other on this entire planet. So
in 6 months' time, what would you be hoping that would come to fruition based on your hope of what what's happened here?
I think I've, from a lot of the sessions online, I've been taking a lot of notes on things that I want to take back to my industry and share. I think there's a lot of cross-industry applications that don't often get talked about, and so having all of us here in one location to be able to share, you know, how we're dealing with burnout, how people are experiencing eco-grief, strategies of leading upwards, your own personal strategy. These aren't things that are taught on a normal day in a normal career, and so to have the opportunity to learn that in this environment surrounded by some very diverse minds, that's what I hope to take home and then think differently with.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what might your team notice if you were putting into place some of the things that you've learned?
Yeah, I think especially in cybersecurity, we have a lot of burnout because it's always just a game of cat and mouse. So the instant takeaways I'm taking back to my team are definitely learning about stress, identifying stress in your own self and in the team. I think cultural norms is something we need to talk more about. So when we're building our team strategies, we're all on the journey together and we understand what's underpinning the team and why we are the way we are. And I think we need to talk more about diversity. I think in cybersecurity, we definitely don't have enough women in the industry. And just addressing and having the conversations is such a great opportunity to start the next stage.
Last question. Done very well.
Thank you.
What's your one sustainability tip that you want others to know about? Just one.
Well, someone said it, so hopefully it's already on your interview, but it's been resonating with me that money talks, and so the biggest personal impact that I can have is to invest sustainably. So it's definitely something I'm going to be taking away and thinking about is for my money and what opportunity I have and privilege I have, how do I make sure that money talks?
Yeah, and that's from possibly a family relative. Rebecca Wade said that,
Isn't
didn't
that
she?
funny?
Thank you, Ray.
No, thank you.
So here is, I'm going to just show you a video of me so you can see what the setting is like and some of my learnings already on the ship. So let's have a look at my reflection.
So here I am after just a magical cruise on the Zodiacs around this bay in here. Went through some sea ice that we crunched through to get to the bay, and if you can see behind me there's just stunning mountains, and we got blue sky, sunshine, which is really rare, and then we saw an iceberg actually flip, this big one, so I captured it all on video, which is really, really exciting. So it doesn't get better than this, and the fresh air, and just can't believe the scenery. Sometimes you have to pinch yourself that it's actually real, because it does look like a picture. Sun sets at about 10:30, but then the sun, even though the sun goes down, the light is still like dusk until I think it's about 1:30 and the sun comes up again. But it's always dim daylight. What an impact Antarctica has had on me, and we had a wonderful discussion about climate change, or environmental change as I understand now. So much to consider, because if Antarctica melted, it would mean our water levels would rise by 60 metres, which is hard to believe. So a lot of countries would disappear. So we have to do everything we can to save our planet and save Antarctica to be pristine like it is now.
So Mel, I might answer the question that's come up.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the question was, what were some of the key issues or hurdles you found a lot of the women on board were facing? Great question, Tina. So basically, oh, did something else come up? No. The common themes were not being heard. Yep. So particularly the ones who worked in policy in government or worked in universities. There's a very hierarchical, structure, and just not being heard was a key one that I kept in. Imposter syndrome, was another one that kept coming up. And visibility was the other one, being able to have a platform to be able to speak up. And so this is the whole structure of this program, creating relationships and collaborations after Antarctica. So what I hadn't realized was going to be an incredible impact is I now have 88 women all around the world that I can just ask a question of, because our WhatsApp group just is going on fire all day. And I didn't realize how key that is into progressing in your career or having a voice, is having your network. And I think, and the support, yes, you're not alone. And I think that was a key thing that I didn't realize how important that is. And I can go to someone in Colombia, in Scotland, in Kenya, in South Africa. And so it's like, wow, this network of amazing, talented women, half of them had PhDs. So they are so bright, but their environment isn't enabling them to flourish.
Yeah. I have one question as well. What would be your biggest sustainability tip?
I think what Bree just said, that was an eye-opener for me.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, that if we want to really make a difference, money talks. So find out, who are your banks investing in? Where is your super being invested? And if they are with sustainable companies, then that's great. If they're not, ask them to shift it. Yeah. Or go to a bank that does do sustainable investing. Or if you're going through a financial advisor, get them to do it. So that's one thing I'm scheduling before the end of the year, is meeting with my financial advisor and go, tell me, where are you investing my super? Because I have a self-managed super fund. I want to know, I want to see that they are really responsible organizations.
There are quite a few different apps now available where you can self-invest and do all of those things. Sharesies, for example, is one of them. And specifically on there, you can select whether you want environmentally friendly companies to invest in. Do you want high risk? Do you want low risk? But specifically in those green companies. And it just makes you stop and think before you just willy-nilly go and invest. Who am I actually investing in? And it just opens your eyes so much more. So it's definitely something that's making traction, but not quick enough.
Not quick enough. And then there's the basic things we can do at home, in terms of being sustainable and that. And I've actually cut down the meat I eat, the amount of meat meals I have, and have every second day I'll be vegetarian, just to reduce that a bit, in terms of that costs a lot of money to actually create meat for us to eat. Yeah.
Correct.
And the other aspect is, what is the supply chain? So we listened to Patagonia CEO speak about their whole setup of their organization is not to have people who purchase clothes, but they're not customers, they're owners. And that shift of thinking of, so the products they sell are lifelong. We're not churning through and creating this whole lot of landfill. And they went to the point of looking at all their supply chain and making sure they are ethical, they're sustainable in terms, yeah. So if more organizations did that in terms of the circular economy, the more impact we'll have climate change-wise.
Goodness.
Yeah.
There are no more questions at the moment, but please, again, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and I'll let you continue.
Okay. So I've got just a couple of more slides to go. So collaboration is key. Sorry, put my microphone back in. And we had someone from Kenya, Priscilla was from Kenya. These two were from Beijing. Alison was from background Korean, but lives in America. And this is the wonderful person I ended up being good friends with, but I actually injured my thumb. And she was the one who came to my rescue. But I did see, and you may want to Google the Nobel Prize video. I'm not going to show you it now. But basically, the fellow who got the Nobel Prize for this year said, if we're going to tackle this issue of climate change, the collaboration is key. So a bit like Antarctica, everyone is focused on peace and science. That's what we've got to do in terms of climate change. It's a collaborative effort. And that's what the main output from this experience has been for me, that how do you help keep collaborating on bigger topic areas? And it's hard to do it on your own. You need that network to be able to do it. In the background here, you can actually see the size of our ship. On the left-hand side is a really big ocean liner. So it was tiny. So it was a bit confronting when we were going up to see it, that it was quite small, and it did rock a lot over Drake's Passage. And we're very lucky that our tour guide, who is a scientist and a professor around Wales, told us that we got it at a 5 out of 10 going over, and a 2 out of 10 coming back, but it was still pretty rocky, and we all still had seasickness patches on to get us through that. So my insights, I've said many of them already, which is leadership for the future is around working beside people, not working on people. So that command control style of leadership from the past is not cutting it anymore. Gen Z want partnership, want a guide on the side. Yeah, they don't want a sage on the stage. They want you to work with them to develop them. And I think it really hits home in terms of safety leadership. People don't want that compliance of focus for safety anymore. There is an element of that, but you don't need to lead it in that way. And some of the progressive organizations have realized that, and they're doing safety a bit differently. And I think the leadership ability and management ability comes down to how do you collaborate, work beside people so they have the autonomy to make decisions. I think that's a big one for me. The other insights is, we have to know ourselves. If we don't know how we're coming across to others, if we don't know the impact of our leadership style, our communication style is with others, then you're not realizing how you're either building engagement or decreasing engagement. And the direct line leader manager has influence on their team's well-being. So knowing their own approach to well-being and looking after their own well-being is critical for creating a thriving workplace. And the last one, the insights, was around, I didn't know much about sustainability, about climate change, but boy, I know a lot now. And having had that experience of seeing an environment that was incredibly pristine, and you may have heard the awe effect, it had that, where it's like, now I've had this experience, I want to do everything I can to actually help preserve it. And when you have that experience of being in nature and wanting to preserve it, I think that's going to have a big impact on climate change. And the greed aspect around fossil fuel and everything, it needs to go if we're going to survive this, really, as Greta Thunberg says about fire is burning, the house is burning. We all need to do our bit to help the change. So I think they were my key ones. I think what people are wanting from leaders going forward, to add to some of those insight, employees are wanting to be seen as a whole person. So supporting their well-being and their sense of purpose, help them feel like that they belong and actually are cared for. So that empathy is really important, and growing and developing them. And so those blue styles that you saw from the lifestyles inventory, that's all about these things here. They also want flexibility in how and where they work. And many of you are hearing things of, or experiencing things of, people being mandated to come back to the office. That we're going backwards. Yeah. But there needs to be hybrid, some form, because that impacts women. Now, as soon as we say everyone back at work, flexibility has gone out the window. And people are wanting to be spoken to in a respectful way, where they are seen as part of the problem solving and decision making, rather than just being told what needs to happen. So I think that's basically my presentation. Last comment I'll say, you are only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And so I didn't realize how stimulating breakfast, lunch, and dinner conversations were having interacted with these amazing women. And I was able to introduce to the ship an approach that I'm passionate about and have spoken quite a few times in MyOsh webinars, which is being solution focused. We can't solve the problem with the same kind of thinking that we've used in the past. We really need to think about things differently. And it's not about researching the problem to the nth degree. It's about looking forward in terms of what is it we want to help make progress. And I introduced them to it through this board game, solution focused mindset of board game. So any further questions that might pop up?
Even just on that, when you just finished then, it's that age-old saying, if nothing changes, does it? So when you say you can't continue solving a problem the way you always have, it's so true. You just can't do that. And it's so important to be able to change and have your eyes open to new possibilities and different ways of thinking and different ways of learning. I mean, even after this, you mentioned the awe effect, and I'm just sitting here going, looking at this place and learning about things that I had no idea about. So thank you so much for this. I absolutely loved it. And I'm sure everybody else who gets to witness this is as inspired as I am to go and look into it more and just understand things differently. One thing I did want to mention was you mentioned that climate change is now called environmental change. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah, because there's been a lot of negative press around climate change. It's actually being a bit more holistic, that environmental change, that it's impacting everything that we do. And so there's a concept called One Health. Yep. So One Health is about how, as a globe, we can look after the planet, people, countries, everything. So it's actually all connected. So we just don't look at climate change on its own.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. We have to rethink how we eat. We have to rethink how we farm. How do we create more natural areas? Because we've cut down so many trees, we've farmed so many areas. We need more nature, basically.
It's funny how rewording one phrase in just one simple change can release such a stigma as well. Like the word climate change just automatically it rings alarm bells, but when you hear environmental change, it's like, oh, what's that? Let me learn about this, rather than just focusing on climate change. So that's why it pricked up in my ears. I was like, oh, this is a new way of thinking about it. So again, thank you. I'm sure, like everybody else, everybody would be grateful for your time today, Annette, and we're very excited. Like I said, this is our last webinar for the year, and what a one to end on. So we are so grateful for you and all the time and the effort that you put into everything you do for us here at MyOsh. And we hope everybody watching has a wonderful and safe Christmas and New Year break. And Annette, I know we'll be working together in the new year on a lot more fun things. So yeah, I think that's it. As we mentioned, I will be sending out the slides and the video link to this webinar after it's all processed. I know that Annette is always open and happy to chat about anything further that you guys have. And I think we'll leave it at that. Do you have any other words, Annette?
Yeah, I was just going to say, please reach out and connect on LinkedIn, because I'm telling the story of my experience on LinkedIn over the coming months, and there'll be more videos, more footage in that, so you can learn about Antarctica, because it needs saving.
All of those links into the show notes, as we mentioned earlier, and I know that we sent out your LinkedIn details previously as well, so we will we'll get it all pumping and hope for a bigger and brighter future for us all.
Fabulous. Thank you for the opportunity.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful week.